Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I'd like to talk about this sword. This is a Belgian sword, and specifically it's a second general model infantry officer's sword. This model was issued starting in 1845, and as the name suggests, it came to substitute a first general model which had existed since 1836. The two models of sword are virtually identical, with the main differences being in the decoration on the shell guard and some differences in the scabbard. And as you can probably tell, they're heavily inspired by the French model 1816 épée. This sword had a rather long service life, so it existed from 1845 until technically sometime before World War I. And I mean technically in the sense that according to Swords DB, which is an amazing resource if you're interested in Belgian swords, there is no documentation certifying its decommissioning. So what we do have instead are some documents between 1911 and 1913, which kind of document the phasing out of the sword rather than a hard decommissioning. So in 1911, you see it mentioned together with a new model of a saber, and starting with 1913, it's not mentioned anymore. However, as we know from many different sword models, this does not mean that the sword was not used after 1913, for instance. So a rather long service life. And this means that a lot of these were produced, making it a rather common sword in the terms of Belgian sword market, but also a sword that can be kind of hard to specifically pinpoint in time. So while you can easily identify it, there are some very specific markings, some very specific details about it that can unquestionably identify it. Dating it precisely is a bit of a different issue because these marks don't really change or evolve much over time. So, as is the case with this sword specifically, there is nothing that can help us really date it apart from it being in between the middle of the 19th century to before World War I. So it can be a little frustrating if you're the kind of person that really enjoys kind of diving into the specific details of your own sword versus a general knowledge of the model. That being said, not all is lost. There are some official variations of it, and these can help us at least determine if the sword was used by a senior officer or a junior officer, for instance, or there are some specific units that had different swords. So some were not brass or gilded, but were steel or silvered. And others with specific decorations here may refer to units, colonial units in the Congo. So without further waste of time, let's jump into the details and look at the sword close up. Okay, let's take a look at the details of the blade. So first of all, by decree, like the official length of the blade is 82 centimeters, and the blade has a diamond section, so each side of the blade has two sloping sides to it with a central ridge, as you can see here. Let's move into the details of the hilt. So, the first thing you may notice is that it has a collapsible shell guard. This obviously made it easy to transport and to wear. Normally, this button would be a little bit thicker, or it would have some kind of a retaining function, so it would hold the shell in place. But it has been worn over time in this case, so this shell moves freely, as you can see. The other one is fixed and has some decorations we will dive into in just a moment. The quillon, you can see here, and quite interestingly has a lion's head. So the lion is a very common symbol in Belgian heraldry, or in Belgian like official symbology. So there's one there, but it's not the only one, as we'll see soon. We then have a rather lovely bone grip, very shiny, with metal wire running along it. In this specific sword, it's slightly worn on the inside. This may be because of use, so because of being worn, it may have got scuffed. But it may also be, I don't know, I hypothesize it might have been hanging on a wall. So this would be how you would hang it, just because it fits flush with the wall. So, but yeah, you can see it's slightly scuffed. Moving on to the knuckle guard. It has these two branches that come in from the cross guard, and one comes in from the shell guard. They meet in the middle. The knuckle bow then moves down to the pommel with minor decorations. So there's a little bit of some decoration here and here, but overall it's relatively simple. And then we have the pommel construction. So you have the pommel here. There's a pommel cap, which in this case is just slightly loose, and the blade is pinned into that cap. So let's see if we can get it in focus. Yes. So there you can see. So it's slightly loose, as I mentioned, but that's only the cap, because the blade is actually quite fixed in place. So it's not really, it's a cosmetic issue more than a functional one. We also have these two delicately decorated rings. And then we can move to the actual decoration on the hilt, on the shell guard. So what you'll see here is a lion holding a shield in which there's a letter. In this case, it's an L. The L stands for Leopold, and unfortunately, it can stand for Leopold I, the second, potentially even the third. So that's why I mentioned before that even though you have recognizable data and information, it still doesn't really help place the sword specifically, unless you have a model with an A that stands for Alexander. So in that case, you would at least know, you would be able to date it to at least one specific period in time. But if you have an L, as is the majority of cases, and as is mine, yeah, don't hold your breath in terms of being able to identify it. Under the lion, we have some laurel and oak branches decorating the guard, the shell guard here, and everything is on a textured background. So let's see if we can get a better visual of that texture, because it's actually quite nice. Yeah, there we see. So it's a rather lovely textured background. This is a sword for junior officers. Senior officers would have had 6 flags, so 3 shooting out per side, and that would have determined the senior officer status. And to determine first general model from a second, you have around the lion there would be a wreath. So in this case it's not there, so it determines it, it specifies this sword as a second general model. The lack or presence of flags for senior officers would have been the same even in the first general model. Okay, moving on to the blade. Oh, before we actually talk about the blade, some other variations are in the hilt. So, for example, construction not in brass, but made, for example, in steel or silver-plated, or I think like German silver, if I'm not mistaken. These would have been normally swords used by specific units like medical units or veterinarian units. One other difference you may find, if you find 2 lions, one on each side, holding a shield with a motto. The shield, the crest, represents the symbol of the colonial, the colony of Congo. So those would have been used by colonial units in Congo. And as far as I know, or I have been able to read, these are the only official variations. You might find some of these that don't match any of the things I mentioned, and that is because, as was frequent in the 19th century, a lot of officers chose to, and especially towards the end, if we think about like model 1896 French swords with the fantasy hilts, it was quite common for officers to have their own hilt customized and designed. So you might have hilts that vaguely match what I'm describing now, but don't. And those would probably be then custom models. Looking at the blade, we see a rather long and thick ricasso. There are no marks that I'm able to see. No maker's marks at least, because as you can see, the blade is actually rather delicately and lovely and very beautifully etched. So we have some floral decorations, we have some not unit decorations, but we have some like military themed decorations here. And as we move up, we go back into floral themes. There is, and yeah, that ends on this side. This side is also quite interesting because as you can see, one of the decorations here is a snake that is kind of slithering up through a circle there, so I find that very interesting. I'm not sure what the symbology is around the snake for military swords. As I mentioned, the blade has a diamond section, so let's get that back in focus. So there we go. You have your 4 facets of the blade. There are no fullers. It's a rather straightforward blade in the sense that this middle ridge runs right up to the tip, which is a spear tip, and is you would not want to drop on that. However, the blade is not sharp, so it's a safe-ish to handle blade. So there we go. These are the details of the Belgian second general model 1845. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Personally, for me, this is a rather frustrating sword because I am the kind of person that enjoys the unique details of a specific object. And while it's very fun and enjoyable to learn about the model and to learn about the history and the context in which this model sword was used, there's always something missing for me personally. Like I would like to be able to give this exact sword a little bit more history. But I can't, and that's that for this video. So thank you for watching and see you in the next one.